Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Pro Wrestling Chat. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen. This week we are discussing WCW. Yes, World Championship Wrestling. The company that once defeated the WWE in the television ratings for 2 years straight and became the #1 wrestling company in the world. Of course, after that, things kind of went downhill for them. They ended up losing some of their talent, some of their major talent, like Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. They defected to the WWE because they weren't being used right. And then some others followed after that. And eventually they start losing a lot of their top talent. And to make things worse, they hired Vince Russo thinking that he was going to refocus things, and it ended up going further down the tubes, and eventually they got bought out from none other than Vince McMahon and WWE. Which is really sad, because now they are defunct, and they're just collecting dust in the WWE's video library. And it's kind of sad because when you think about it, I feel like they're going to be forgotten at some point. And a lot of people already have, It seems like their legacy is going to be forgotten. Because if you think about it, a whole generation has passed since 2001, since the demise of WCW. And people are now in their 20s, and they're watching, AEW and WWE and, Impact and stuff like New Japan, stuff like that, They're not thinking about WCW. Some of them probably don't even know what WCW is or the legacy of it. Of course, the old school people like me do, but some of the young kids these days probably don't care, probably don't give a damn about it, and that's kind of sad. So I'd hate to see the legacy just completely die, because WCW was such a great company at one time, A lot of great history in that company. A lot of great wrestling, a lot of great matches, a lot of great factions, a lot of great stars went in and out of there. I'd hate to see it just die completely. So I pose this question to you guys, since things haven't really gone so well for Vince McMahon lately, especially in 2022 when he had these sexual misconduct allegations made against him, and then he was forced to kind of retire for a little while. He did kind of weasel his way back into the company, and did become the chairman of the board again, only to sell the company to this company called Endeavor, which owns UFC and the Ultimate Fighting Championship. The deal is not quite finalized yet, I don't think. I think they have to work out some of the kinks a little bit. But it does seem inevitable at this point that they are going to purchase WWE. Unfortunately, they are keeping Vince McMahon around as kind of the head of WWE still. But he won't own the company anymore. So, with that being said, what happens to WCW and all the other companies that Vince McMahon swallowed up? Like, ECW and AWA and the Mid-Atlantic and the Mid-South Wrestling and the Smoky Mountain Wrestling and all that other stuff that he knocked out on his way to #1 company in the world, What happens then? What if someone came in and made an offer to Endeavor to buy WCW? What if they came in and just offered them like $100 million or something just to buy the rights to WCW and the name and the logo and the merchandising rights and the videotape library rights, and somehow secured a spot on network television to relaunch Monday Nitro once again. Can you imagine? That would be amazing. You can't tell me that people wouldn't turn their heads and go, whoa, you gotta be kidding me. WCW is back? No way! I think it would be huge. I think that could be like a revolution in wrestling all over again, you know? Because they do have, right now, you got the AEW's doing pretty well, you got WWE still doing pretty well, Impact, New Japan are doing pretty well. But it's wrestling in general is not what it was in the 90s, let's face it. It's no way near as big. But I think it could take something like that to kick a shot in the arm to the fans, you know, and bring real fans and real eyes to wrestling. I think people would go nuts. So it'd be like, wow, you know. I think if you got the right people to run it, you know, the right people in charge, it could be amazing, you know. It could be great again. I'm going to say it right now. I think Eric Bischoff should be the one to buy it. And I know that would piss off a lot of people. Like, what? What are you, crazy? You nuts? Because a lot of people blame him for the demise of WCW. Him and Vince Russo and Hulk Hogan. A lot of people blame them. But I think Eric Bischoff at this point has learned from some of the mistakes he made. And I think he's just a brilliant guy. I feel like if you just gave him the ball and if he actually owned the company, I think he could do wonders with it. I think he's smart enough to know that he could not run the creative completely. He would have to have some guys underneath him to do the creative. But I think if he hired like a few of the legends just to kind of help out, like, you know, Hulk and Sting and Ric Flair and a few of the legends like that, like Goldberg maybe, that were there at the time, that I think if you had like a few of them on commentary, like Hulk and Sting and Goldberg and stuff, that would be so cool, you know? Like, don't have them running WCW, but just have them there as kind of, you know, on-air personalities. They don't have to be involved in everything. But I think just having them there, doing their little roles, would be really cool, you know? It would bring some legitimacy, and then you could hire the young guys, the young bucks, maybe even the young bucks, but the young up-and-coming stars, and make them big stars in the WCW, and let them run with it, and bring some great young talent in women's wrestling, of course, which WCW was never able to really do. They never really had much of a women's division, so I would like to see them bring in the whole thing like they did before, like have some of the Japanese wrestlers, the Mexican wrestlers, the cruiserweights, but this time they could have a strong women's division, which is something they never had. That would be great. And of course you'd have the big main event people too, of course. The heavyweights, you know. I think it could be amazing again if they did it right, you know, if the right people were in charge and the right people bought it. I think it could be amazing instead of sitting there collecting dust on the WWE network, which, you know, do people really even watch that anymore at this point? Because now it's just on Peacock. It's not even its own entity. How many people go back and watch, like, WCW and AWA and all that? Probably not a whole hell of a lot. Just like the hardcore wrestling nerds like me watch it now and then. But just imagine if WCW got those rights back, got the videotape library back. Maybe they could have their own streaming network as well, because that's something they never had. You know, imagine if there was the WCW streaming network. How cool would that be? That would be amazing. So what do you guys think? Do you think it's possible someone could buy WCW and relaunch it? And what would it take? What do you think it would take to bring the WCW back to life, to resurrect the dead? It's fun to think about, you know? And I actually think it is possible. I think something like that could happen if someone was determined enough and made a great deal with enough money behind them, you know? I think it's possible, you know? What if someone just hit the lottery and won like $100 million in the lottery or something, you know? Or $1 billion in the lottery or something, and had just unlimited money to play around with, and they were a hardcore wrestling fan, you know? It could happen. It's possible. Or Eric Bischoff could probably do it, you know? Someone like that. Tony Khan maybe could even do it. But obviously he probably wouldn't, because he wants AEW to be number one. So I don't think he would do that. But yeah, I think it needs to be someone that doesn't have their own wrestling company already, you know? It's gotta be someone that just wants the WCW to live again and to be on top again. So yeah, I think that would be so cool. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Pro Wrestling Chat. Tune in and lock up.